Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is Jason Rivera, and today I'm going to be doing another React project. So, this project is going to be basically a page that renders out a bunch of dog photos, essentially. But what we're going to do is we're going to be utilizing a third-party API. So, I think this will be a good project to get your feet wet using APIs to get data from a third party and also using multiple components and seeing how that all fits together. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. Let's get into it. So I just have a diagram here of what the project is going to look like. It's really simple. It's just going to have a title and it's going to have a bunch of dog photos. And so this is going to be broken down into, it's going to be broken down into three components. The first one is going to be our main app component, so the overall container. And we're going to have another component that's going to be called, I believe, dog list. So that'll basically be the container for all the dog images. And our third component will be a dog photo. So these will all be individual components as well. All right, so let's get into the code. So here's my code editor. I use Create React App to get it all set up. And yeah, so let's have a look here. So right now I just have a h1. Well, right now we have our app component, and all it's doing is rendering out this div with an h1 with welcome to dog world. And if you look at this page, it's right there. So we got that there. And so what I'll do first is I'll just go ahead and create our other two components, which is the dog list and the dog. So what I'll do is, let's see, I'll just write out here. So dog list. So dog list will be our second component. And so we can go ahead and now make a dog list component. All right, awesome. So in our dog list component, we're going to want to import React, so we can use some React stuff. Cool. And now I'll create the dog list component, and I'm going to make it a functional component. So there's two types of components. You can make a class-based component like this, or you can make a functional component. And for class-based components, usually you would use that because you're going to store some type of state in that component. In our case with dog list, we're not going to store any state. We're just going to be rendering out HTML or data. But yeah, so let's call this dog list, and I'm going to set that equal to, so we can create our function. And what this dog list is going to do, it's just going to return, let's see, so right now I'll just have it return a div for now. So I'll give it a class name too, container. All right, so that's our dog list component for right now. We're gonna add more to it later, but for now this is the basic setup that we need. And we also need to export this component. So we do this because if we want to use this component in other files, we would need to make sure it is being exported. So we're going to do export default dog list. All right, cool. And let's see. Okay, awesome. So now we've created our dog list component, and now let's go ahead and create our dog component. So we'll call this dog.js, and it's going to look very similar to this as well. So we'll just go ahead and copy this, and then we'll just rename it. I'll just give this a child class name, and we're going to give this a dog. Okay, yeah, I'll just leave that blank. Okay, sweet. So we got our basic setup. We have our app component set up. We also have our dog list component created, and we also have our dog component. And yep, so that's pretty much all we need. And so now what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna go into the part where I'm going to be grabbing the data from the third-party API. And so the API I'm going to be using, whoops, will be this one, dog API. And it's a pretty simple API. We're going to be using this endpoint, and all this endpoint does is it returns a JSON object of basically dog URLs, dog image URLs. So this is what it would look like. It'll just be an object, and it'll have this message property, and it'll have an array of dog images, essentially. So, but before we get to that, what I need to do is I need to initialize the state for my app component. So to do that, you would need to create a constructor. You're going to pass in props. We're going to do super and props. And awesome. And so the reason why we're doing this is because since app extends component is a part of the React library, we're basically passing down all the properties from React to our app component. Alright, so now what we want to do is we're going to initialize our state for our app component. So to do that, you just need to do this dot state equals an object. And if we think about it, for our project, the state we're going to want to store is, we're basically just going to want to store the image URLs for the dogs. So I will create a property called dogs, and I will, let's see, dogs, and I'll just make it an array. So that will be our state for our whole application. And let's see, so now we're going to go into the part where we are going to fetch that data from the API. So to do that, I'm going to use this method called component did mount. And so component did mount, this is a React lifecycle method. And so the way this works is React, every time there's a change in the DOM tree, React will re-render itself, or the React will re-render the DOM. Well, it'll only re-render the changes that happened in the DOM. And so whenever it re-renders, React will fire off some lifecycle methods. So one of those methods that React will fire off when the DOM re-renders is called this component did mount. So I believe it's intuitive. So all it does is when React re-renders the DOM, once the components mount, then this method will get fired. So what we're going to do in here, so once our components mount to the DOM or to the page, we're going to want to make our request to that third-party API to get the data we want. So we're going to use the fetch method, which is a method that you use to make HTTP requests to third-party APIs. And so the way this works is you pass in an argument. So this will be the URL for the API that you're trying to get. So what it's going to be, so in this case, we're going to copy this one. Let's see, so we'll copy that. And we're actually going to change the 3 to a 10 because I want to get 10 images. You can get whatever, you can, I believe you can get up to 50, I'm not sure, but in this case, we're just going to do 10. And now we're going to do a dot then. So let's see. So this is going to be asynchronous. So we're going to make this fetch request, or we're going to make this request to this third-party API, and we're going to call this dot then method. And so when we make that request and we're waiting to get our data, this dot then method will run this code once it receives the data from this third-party API. So we're gonna do. So actually, Yeah, so it returns a promise. So this is a promise-based function. So when we make this request, it's gonna return us a promise object, and that's why we can call this .then method on it. So we'll call .then, and once we actually get the data that we want, we'll do some stuff with it. But yeah, we can go more into that in another video. But anyways, so we'll do .then, and I'll just call the parameter res, and I'm going to return res.json. And so, so what this is going to do is when we get this response from this API, we're going to just make sure it's in a JSON format. So we're going to do res.json, and then we're going to do another .then, and we're going to do, let's see. So now we will get the data that we want. So we'll call this, oops. So now we're going to do, so in this case, I'll just console.log it so we can actually see the data. And the reason why I wrote it this way, because if you notice, this is written like a little bit different, is because whenever you declare a function and you declare it this way, this is basically saying that, okay, since I'm not using any curly braces like I am here, this just means that I want to return this res.json statement. And in this one, since I added curly braces, I'm not actually returning anything. I would actually have to write the return statement manually like that. But in this case, since I wrote it that way, it already implies that it's going to return something. So that's just it's just some ES6 syntax stuff right there. And yeah, so let's save that, and let's go to our page. Let's see. So dog list is not defined, line 27. Oh yeah, right. So okay, so yeah, so you have to import dog list. So dog list there. All right. So since we were using this dog list component, we didn't actually have it in our file, so we had to import it. So now if we go back, there we go. And we're not going to see anything because we still don't have anything inside that dog list component. All right, cool. So then if we look at our console, we'll have our object. So we'll have this property message, and then we'll have all our image URLs that we want. That's good. All right, sweet. So now that we have our data, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set the state to contain the data that we got from our API. So right now in our state we have dogs, which is an empty array. So in order for us to update the state, what we're going to do is we're going to do a this.setState, and we're going to pass in an object, and we're basically going to put in dogs because that's what our state contains in here, and we're going to set that equal to data.message. So now our state will have, now our state is going to have dogs, which will be equal to data.message, which is an array of all of these URLs right there. Cool. Okay, so sweet. So it looks like we have all our state and API fetching stuff done. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take the data that we have in our state and pass it down to our other two components. And so now we're going to actually make use of props. And so props, you can think of props as a way to pass down data to different components. So in this case, we're going to use a prop. We're going to add a prop to the dog list component so that we can pass down the state that we have in our app component. And so we're going to, let's see. And so the way to do that is all you have to do is inside the component that you made here, you will add a prop, and you can name it anything you want. So in this case, I'll just call it dogs. So dogs is going to equal to, we're going to add some curly braces there. It's going to be equal to this.state.dogs. So we'll have the array of the dog URLs, dog image URLs. All right, sweet. Okay, so that is done, and now we'll go into our dog list. And now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to, so in our dog list, we're going to want to take that data we got from our app component, so that those array of URLs, and for each URL, we're going to want to make a dog component. So let me just do this real quick to see if this makes sense. So I'm going to make a const dogs array, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to do props. So in our dog list, in order to make use of the props that it was passed, we need to add a props parameter here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do props dot dog. I think it's dogs, right? Because we named it dogs. So we're going to do props dot dogs dot map. So map is just an array method to iterate over the data that you have. And we're going to cast in a callback, and we're going to give it a parameter. We'll just call it dog URL. And so we're going to map through that, and we're going to actually return. We're going to return a dog component. So we're going to do dog. Oops. There we go. So what we're doing now is we're taking the data that dog list has, which is the array of all the dog image URLs, and we're going to iterate over each URL. And for each URL, we're going to create a dog component, and we're actually going to pass into the dog component a prop, and we're going to call this URL. We're going to set this equal to dog URL. All right. So yep. So that's that's all that's happening there. So for every image URL inside the props.dogs, we're going to create a dog component. And now what we want to do is we're going to want to go down here into our div, and all we're going to do is we're going to pass our dogs array. Sweet. So now this div will have a bunch of dog components there. Sweet. All right, so now let's go into our dog component, which will be our last thing. So we're almost done. And remember, dog also has props that we passed it down to from dog list. And in this one, we're going to give it an image tag, and we're going to give it a source, and we're going to do props dot, I believe it was URL. All right. So I'm also going to give it some styles. So I'm going to give this some styles so it renders out nicely. So I'm going to give this image a width of 300 and a height of 300. Oops. Alright, so all this dog component is going to be rendering out is a div with an image tag with some styles on it, and the source being the props.url, which is what we passed from our dog list component down to this dog component. And we're going to do that. Alright, so now let's go back to our page. Hopefully nothing's broken. Oh, it looks like something is broken. Dog is not defined on line 6. And we probably did not import it. Right. So we got to import dog from dog. Right. Yeah, that looks right. Yep. Since we're using this dog component, we actually have to import it into this file. All right. That looks good. Let's save it. And Let's see, image element, okay. So it looks like we're having a little issue here. Alright, let's try to debug it. Alright, so we're making our request. We're setting state to dogs and data.message. Okay, that looks right. And then in our dog list, we're passing dogs. So this.state.dogs. That looks right as well. And dogs array, we're doing props.dogs.map. And we're doing dog URL, return dog. Okay, I see what the problem is. So this prop is wrong. So it should be URL with lowercase. Alright, I think it should work. Let's hope so. Alright, so we're getting some images now. Sweet. The only thing is it's not styled the way I want it to be styled. Let me look at my style because I had created the styles previously. Let me see if I need to make some changes. Oh yeah, I know. So I need to actually import these styles into this component. So I gotta do an import dog list. Oops. Import dog list dot CSS. There we go. So yeah, basically I'm using Flexbox. So we're just using display flex, justify content. So I didn't want to go too deep into the CSS in this part since it's not the main topic about this video. But yeah, so yeah, we got some images now. So it's not the prettiest looking page in the world, but hopefully you guys were able to take something away from this and seeing how we make an API or make a request to a third-party API, getting some data, and also using some components to render out that data. So yeah, so I hope you guys found this helpful. If you guys enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. I tried not to make this video too long, but you know, sometimes it can be a little longer when you're kind of going more in depth with some stuff. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe. And yep, so thanks for watching and have a good day.